So we've been exploring a book and a series of interviews done by Arthur Brooks and Oprah Winfrey on the topic of building the life you want. And today, specifically, we're going to be looking at the ideas of building on what really matters, what's really important. And as I was thinking more about this, I was remembering that this is such a universal and old idea to think about what really counts, what really matters. I was remembering Jesus' command to seek God with all our mind, with all our heart, with all our soul, that we are to put God first and everything else will fall into place, a paraphrasing of that teaching, a teaching about looking at what really matters, and that when we have that at the center of our lives, when we're clear about that for ourselves, what really matters, and we have that as the center of our lives, then everything else we begin to orient around that. It helps us to know what we say yes to, what we say no to, and maybe what we say simply not now to. As I get older, I am really appreciating that it's not just black or white, it's not just yes or no, that sometimes it's just not now. Just not now. So Jesus talked about building on what really matters. Many of you are familiar with the late author and teacher Stephen Covey and his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that whole book really is about building on what matters most, to begin with the end in mind. What is that about? That's about knowing what matters most to you and building on that and holding that clear in your mind. And in this book, Building the Life You Want, clearly Arthur Brooks and Oprah talk about that as well. And some of the research that they pull upon is social science research that suggests that there are 4 pillars, 4 universal pillars on which building one's life matters most. I'm going to tell you what those 4 pillars are, and then we're going to focus on 2 of them today and 2 of them next Sunday. So those 4 pillars that social science research say are what matters most in being able to build a really happy and meaningful life. They are family, friendship, work, and faith. Family, friendship, work, and faith. Family. The people we are born into. Family. The people we are born into that we basically don't choose, not in the traditional sense of choosing, with perhaps, or not perhaps, but definitely with choosing our spouse or our life partner. Friends, those folks that we love and that we care about that are not blood related, that are not kin. Work, that meaningful livelihood that we do to be able to meet our basic needs and at least some of our wants. And then faith, and they make a very clear point when they're talking about faith, and we'll drill into those the last 2 in next Sunday. But when they talk about faith, they're not talking about religion. They're talking about a transcendent belief that there is something more than just us. There is something beyond us, something bigger than us. And in our community, of course, we refer to this as spirituality, right? That I think it's almost universal among people who are drawn into unity or a science of the mind, that we identify as being spiritual, but not religious, right? Spiritual, but not religious. And so that goes right along with what the science is saying. So it's family, it's friends, it's work, it's our livelihood, whether we get paid for it or not, because at a certain point in our lives, we may not be paid for the work that we do anymore. We may be pulling from our retirements and stuff like that, but it's what gives a sense of purpose to our life. And then this transcendent belief that we have. So family, we're going to spend some time on family. And one of the things I loved about how they approach this, I loved the phrase, and the idea to build your imperfect family. You don't like that as much as I do, but that's okay. I love the idea. Imperfect family. Do any of you feel like you have an absolutely perfect family? I don't think any of us feel like we have an absolutely perfect family. That's not a bad thing. It's just kind of what is this idea of building an imperfect family. When we hold the idea of imperfect, I think it gives us permission to be realistic around the people that are our family. Families can be a source of great support and love and encouragement, and they can also be frustrating as all get out. And that might be putting it mildly. When I say that, does anybody come to your mind in your family? Probably so, right? Probably so. They can be functional or dysfunctional, but I think all of our families are imperfect because we're not perfect. We're growing and evolving. Remember that poster that was popular years ago of an adorable little boy, all messy hair, messy clothes, ripped jeans, although this was when ripped jeans was not in. Ripped jeans, messy face, and the caption was, "Be patient with me, God isn't finished with me yet." Right? This idea that we're all of us, no matter how old we are or how young we are growing and evolving into a more perfect, shall I say, expression of ourselves. Arthur Brooks writes in the book, family can bring us to the highest highs and the lowest lows. Would you agree? Amen. Yes, I know that's true of my family, and I love my family. They can bring me, and I'm sure I can bring them to our highest highs and our lowest lows. He goes on to write, families are made up of people mashed together. This can result in the most mystical kind of love, the love you didn't choose, but that was given to you. It inevitably also means plenty of conflict. Even in the best of situations, tension between family members is normal, and crises are par for the course. Family life can be a huge mess. Right? One of the points that he includes in just the statement that I read, and then we're going to unpack it a little bit as we continue to look at family, is this idea of conflict in family. The idea of conflict in family. He identifies that there are 5 common challenges that make family complicated, and conflict is at the top of the list. Those challenges are conflict, insufficient complementarity, the negativity virus, forgiveness, or like lack of forgiveness, and dishonesty. Mull those over for a moment. In terms of family dynamics, think about the times in your families, your family of origin, where it's not been bringing you to the highest high and it has been maybe more difficult. Was one of these at the heart of that? Conflict, insufficient complementarity, we'll go into these, negativity virus, lack of forgiveness, dishonesty. Probably you'll find that one of those was at play. Conflict. There are people who are very conflict averse. Have you found that avoiding conflict in a close relationship really solves the problem? No. And yet don't many of us have a tendency to just not want to go there, right? We just don't want to deal with it. In my experience, and there's a lot of research that seems to suggest that this is also so, is avoiding it doesn't dissolve it. Avoiding it doesn't heal it. Avoiding it doesn't make it go away. It just pushes it down until something else happens that does what? That brings it back up. In the book, Tolstoy's book, Anna Karenina, opening line is this: happy families are all alike, Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And the inability or unwillingness or lack of skill to learn how to deal with conflict is a significant part of that. If we can get comfortable with the fact that conflict is normal in a relationship, we're not always going to see eye to eye. We're not always going to be on our best behavior. I want to do a shout out to my husband, John, who's been an angel since this cast went on Thursday. I've discovered about myself, I am a lousy dependent person. I have been cranky and irritable and probably really unpleasant to be around when all he wants to do is try to help me, and it's like, ugh, right? Difficulty, because stuff comes up in relationships, right? Nod your head if you know what I'm talking. Of course it does. When we're upset in a relationship, if we really peel back, we're upset because we care about the relationship. We want it to be good. We love the other person. That's why we might feel frustrated. That's why the conflict matters to us, because the relationship matters to us. That ought to be part of the reason that we choose to learn how to become more skillful in addressing conflict, in addressing those things, in owning it. Say, yeah, I know I've been cranky and haven't been pleasant to live with. Whatever it is that's going on, to not be afraid, to be honest about it. There's plenty of scripture verses in both the Old Testament and the New Testament about conflict in relationships. If we ever think that people today are dealing with completely different things than people dealt with in the days of Moses or in the days of Jesus, we are mistaken. We still deal with some of the same kind of human challenges and frustrations, and maybe even a little more so. But we're still dealing with some of the same things, which means there's still the same need to learn more skillful behaviors. In Matthew 5:23 and 24, we're reminded, before you present your gift at the altar, if you have aught against your brother, meaning if there is something that is bothering you, something that's unresolved between you and your brother, between you and your sister, between you and a friend, stop the giving at the altar and go take care of that. That's pretty clear, would you not say? It's not saying avoid it. It's not saying go into battle over the conflict, but it is saying go deal with it. Go deal with it. And it seems to me that it's suggesting do it sooner rather than later. I think that the longer we wait, the harder it is to take the action. The longer we wait, the harder it is to take the action. How many of you are familiar with the saying, to not let the sun go down on your anger? From Ephesians, don't let the sun go down on your anger. What is it trying to say? It's trying to say don't avoid that feeling, don't avoid that conflict, but try to find a peaceful way to address it. When we address it, does it mean that we're automatically going to have the other person see things our way? No, it doesn't mean that the other is going to automatically see things our way or agree with us, or all of a sudden everything's going to feel completely rosy and happy and harmonious. We are responsible, though, for our part of what we can do, right? For our part of what we can do. The second of the 5 pieces that they identify as the challenges that arise in family dynamics is the idea of not appreciating complementarity. And that was a new concept for me, at least that word, until I really kind of drilled down and read deeper into the book and listened a little bit more, this idea of appreciating complementarity. And part of what they were suggesting is we tend, especially today in like the dating scene, we tend, because of the kinds of apps that we use to meet people, we tend to focus too much on compatibility. And compatibility often is about shared and common interests. And the authors are suggesting that while there is a place for that, that if that is the only thing in our relationships, we may find that we don't have the strength of intimacy and closeness and the spark that comes from complementarity, meaning in older language, opposites attract. When I started looking at deeper at that, I thought, boy, they really pegged John and me. You ask our kids if mom and dad are the same, and they will look at you and go, nope, not at all. They care about the same things, but their way of being is almost opposite. Sometimes we can be trained to think that somehow that's wrong, or that, well, I should just get the other person to be more like me. Right? No. Appreciating the differences, the richness that can come from that. Am I just having a conversation with me? Is this? Okay. Appreciating those differences, and then also appreciating the things that we do share in common. When we don't appreciate the complementarity, then we can wind up making the other wrong for being so different than we are. I have to watch this with John. I walk into our garage, that's his domain. His choice of music could not be further from mine. I don't think it could be any further. I have to bite my tongue not to say anything. And if I put my smart person hat on, I go, I don't want him to be playing the same stuff I'm playing. I don't want him to like the same things I like. It's kind of cool that we are completely different. Although, when I go in that garage, if I have to concentrate on anything and he's got AC/DC or any of those other bands that I know nothing about, it's like, okay, honey, if you want me to really bring my best mind to this, can you turn that down? Because I can't hold both in my head right now. That's very different. That's very different than trying to make somebody wrong for being different than you are. Right? I've said this so many times over the years. Can you really imagine what it would be like if you woke up tomorrow and every single person in the world thought exactly as you did, liked exactly the things that you liked, and only the things you liked, got upset about exactly the things that you got upset about? Now, I've had people come through the line and say, yes, because I'm perfect. That's why I would like everybody to wake up and be just like me. And of course, they say that tongue in cheek. But would that not be a very boring world? Do you think that we would have as many of the breakthroughs in science or as much creativity? I mean, just think about it for a moment from an artistic point of view. If everybody was exactly like me, same skills, same mind, same everything, there's so much you wouldn't have in the world. And the same is true for you, right? We each have a part to play, and appreciating complementarity is a way of making sure that we lift that up instead of pushing it away. Third point that they make in terms of challenges in family life is dealing with the negativity virus. Personally, I've not had that in my family. I guess I'm very fortunate in that. I can't really think about anybody in my immediate, certainly not my immediate family, and not even my pretty close extended family, not negative. But I know that that's not true for everyone. And part of what they write about in the book is that if you are in a family dynamic where there's a lot of negativity, that just being aware of what you can do with that is important. You know, in a work environment or in, say, a social club or activity, we may find ourselves interacting with people that are very negative and just very critical about everything. And we have a choice in those kinds of relationships to just say, you know what? I'm not going to be part of that group, or I'm not going to be part of that club, because the connections aren't so strong. It's not family. But for many of us, we do value family because, especially imperfect family, right? So we know that no family is perfect. So we come to understand that our families are imperfect, and we say to ourselves, well, okay, if I've got this person in my family that is always so very negative, I'm not going to leave the family because of that. What can I do? A couple of things that we can do is to make sure that we take care of our own positivity, if you will, to take care of our own self, to keep ourselves nurtured and fed in such a way that we can maintain our way of being. And the other is to not take that negativity personally, to not take it personally. I really think that we come into this life experience, I believe that the life experience that we have is not the only one we've ever had, and it's not the last one we're going to have. I believe we come in trailing clouds of glory from another time. And if that's so, I can't prove it, I do believe it. If that's so, then there's a certain predisposition to my soul as I have come into this life experience. For me, just realizing that, just remembering that, helps me to be able to explain to myself the vast different ways of being that people have, and to soften a bit about frustration or irritability about someone who isn't showing up the way I think they should show up. I don't know what predisposition they have already come in with. I don't know what hurts they're dealing with, what life experiences they have dealt with. Does that make sense? It's a way to hold things so that we can show up, I think, in a more spiritually mature and more loving way. A fourth that I think is tremendously important that they talk about is forgiveness, that particularly in families, they use a phrase, the secret weapon of forgiveness. I'm not going to try to give a lesson on forgiveness here, but I want to point out 4 things that they wrote about that I thought was incredibly helpful and new for me in the way that they identified successful forgiveness strategies. I'd never even actually heard that kind of approach. Successful forgiveness strategies. We know that forgiveness is talked about, written about, emphasized in pretty much every spiritual tradition. We have Jesus, when asked about forgiveness, saying to forgive 70 times 7, and he didn't mean just 490 times. That was the symbolic way of saying you practice forgiveness until you have forgiven. Forgiveness is not the same thing as condoning. But the 4 strategies that research seems to suggest, I think, are helpful to keep in mind. The first strategy is discussion. Discussion. Let's talk this through so I can let go of the hurt. Let's talk this through. Let's talk this through so I can let go of the hurt. The second strategy, explicit forgiveness. I forgive you. Maybe totally one-sided. It may be something you say to the other. It may be that you don't get anything back. It may be that you don't even say it to the other, but you've moved to a place from your own deep inner work of being able to explicitly forgive regardless of what the other person does or doesn't do. Nonverbal forgiveness. And I thought, boy, that really describes when John, I can't believe I'm talking as much as I am about John and me this morning, but when John and I have had just normal stuff that comes up in relationships, and we've been remarried to each other since 1988. So we have a very long history, 2 years married, 7 years divorced. You do the math for the rest, I forget now. But enough. Is this nonverbal forgiveness, showing affection after a fight or an argument. thought how many times to myself I thought, has that actually been what I've either done to John or John has done to me when we've just squabbled over something and a little time has gone by, and then there's just a touch on the shoulder or touch on the hand or just something and it's like, it's gone. Nod your head if you've, right, as a strategy, and it's just gone. And then the last strategy they say in the book is minimization, involving classifying the transgression as unimportant and simply choosing to disregard it. It's like the story I read in Reader's Digest so many years ago about a couple that had been married for more than 50 years, and someone in the family was asking them, tell us what your secret was for being married for all of these years. And the woman of the couple said, well, on my wedding day, I made a list of 10 things that no matter what, I would always be understanding and forgiving of my husband. And so the family member wanted to know what was on that list. And he said, I forgot, but whenever something came up, I always said to myself, it's on the list. Isn't that cute? It's on the list. It's on the list. Okay, and the last, they say, is gentle honesty, to not withhold the truth. In family, it's really important to speak honestly, to say, don't just do something because you think that you're going to make me happy by doing it if you really don't want it. Speak honestly. Inherent in all of this, especially the parts that have to do with communication, is that some of us have learned really good communication skills, have learned things like nonverbal communication and other techniques for speaking clearly and speaking well. And so we're probably more comfortable doing some of these things. If you know for yourself that you've never really learned those skills, don't fault yourself for that. You probably didn't have a whole lot of it modeled for you growing up. Take a class or read a book and begin to practice a new way of being. And then in the last few minutes that I have, I want to just talk about that second pillar that they talk about, and that is the pillar of friendship. So the 4 pillars were family, friends, work, and faith. We're going to look at work and faith next week. But they also emphasize how important friendships are, and that there's some research that suggests that as much as 60% of our happiness is tied to positive relationships with those that are not kin. They don't say anything about how many of those relationships, just that having friends is important. Someone that you can call on to know the truth for you when you're feeling afraid. Someone you can call on for help. Someone you can have fun with. Someone you can dream with. Somebody that you can vent with if you need to vent. Somebody that you can cry with. Somebody that no matter who you are or how you show up, can see the real you and love you through it all. We all need that. We all need that. In the book, they say deep friendships go beyond surface level connections to contribute to our personal growth and emotional well-being. True friends see you as you are. See you as you are. Support you through life's ups and downs. Help you become the best version of yourself. Don't we all want that? I don't think anybody wakes up with a desire to be the worst version of themselves. We want, right? We want to be better, a better parent, a better partner, a better friend, a better contributor to society. We don't want to be worse. We want to be better and to have people, or at least a few, or one person in our lives that not because they're kin, but because they've chosen you and you've chosen them, hold for you the absolute highest and best and want to see that in you. Sangha, to me, a Buddhist sense of community, is an opportunity to cultivate that, to find those people, your tribe. And when we have that kind of relationship, we can weather so much of the stuff that happens in life. the tough times, the sad times, the frightening times. Oprah wrote, "A true friend is someone who brings out the best in you, not by changing who you are, but by loving who you are." By loving who you are. She also wrote, "A real friend is not just there for the good times, but walks with you through the challenges, helping you grow all along the way." Our friendships require attention. They require attention. They require intentional planning, intentional time, intentional outreach. That's why if you are at a place in your life where maybe you're still working and you're juggling a lot of things, you may only have the time to have one or two close friends that you continually make time to be with. That's okay. Our lives go in phases. But if we're at a phase in our life where you have quite a bit of extra time, you want to make sure that you are devoting some of that to the people that can lift you up and that you can lift up as well. And to take intentional steps toward that and to evaluate, how are you showing up? Is it always one-sided or is it reciprocal? Last thing I want to end with is this quote. Might want to jot it down and think about it. I don't know who to attribute it to. "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Choose wisely." Namaste.